From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 2 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk. The McLaughlin Group is brought to you by MetLife. Guarantees for the if in life.
Issue 1. Has the storm passed?
The panic in world credit markets reached historic intensity during the past 2 weeks. It prompted a flight to safety of the kind not seen since the Second World War. The Wall Street saga took off on Sunday, September the 7th. The U.S. government seized Fannie and Freddie Mac, the guarantors of $5 trillion in home loans. There used to be a structural oddity, public and private at the same time. Now they are public only. Here's the rationale for the government takeover.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are so large and so interwoven in our financial system that a failure of either of them would cause great turmoil in the financial markets here at home and around the globe.
Well, presidential Republican nominee Senator John McCain believes that Fannie and Freddie have already caused great turmoil, and worse, at home and abroad.
2 years ago, I warned this administration and Congress that regulations for our home loan agencies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, needed to be fixed. When I pushed legislation to reform Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Senator Obama was silent. He didn't lift a finger to avert this crisis. While the leaders of Fannie and Freddie were lining the pockets of his campaign, and they were sowing the seeds of a financial crisis we see today, and they also enriched themselves with millions of dollars in payments. That's not change. That's what's broken in Washington today, my friends. You know, Senator Obama talks a tough game on the financial markets, but the facts tell a very different story. He took more money from Fannie and Freddie than any senator except the Democratic chairman of the committee that regulates them. The chairman of the SEC serves at the appointment of the president and, in my view, has betrayed the public trust. If I were president today, I would fire him.
Question, is McCain giving it to us straight? Did Obama get payola in exchange for resisting any reform of Fannie and Freddie? Meanwhile, McCain was working hard pursuing the reform of Fannie and Freddie. Pat Buchanan.
What you saw, John, is a tremendous recovery by John McCain, who started the week saying the economy is fundamentally sound in good Herbert Hoover language as the whole thing was collapsing. He moved into his populist role, the firing of Chris Cox at the SEC. Now he's against Obama. But I'll tell you, what this has happened this week is at the week's end, Bush and Paulson and Bernanke have moved dramatically with what could be easily $1 trillion bailout. In the last 2 days of the week, there's been almost $1 trillion gain on the market. I think they may have saved an immense collapse here. They certainly have done that temporarily. I've seen some British banks that have gone up, and I'm invested in them, going up 35 and 50%, Barclays and Royal Bank of Scotland. So I think they may have saved it. And there's an awful lot of horrible things went on here. There's been corruption. There's been, I don't say it's payola, but mistakes have been made, blunders have been made. But I'll tell you what, in the final analysis, we're going to have to save the pigs, Eleanor, in order to save ourselves.
I think that sums it all up. I think we can move on now, right? Okay, Obama, counter-strike.
He's calling for the firing of the Securities and Exchange Commissioner. Well, I think that's all fine and good, but here's what I say. In the next 47 days, you can fire the whole trickle-down, on your own, look the other way crowd in Washington who has led us down this disastrous path. Don't just get rid of one guy. Get rid of this administration. Get rid of this philosophy. Get rid of the do-nothing approach to our economic problems and put somebody in there who's going to fight for you. Now let's be clear. Let's be clear. What we have seen in the last few days is nothing less than the final verdict on an economic philosophy that has completely failed. It is George Bush's philosophy. It is John McCain's philosophy.
Question, is Obama's rejoinder politically effective? I ask you, Eleanor.
Well, I'm glad he got back on the issue of John McCain firing the SEC chairman. That's not allowed. FDR tried something similar, and the Supreme Court says that's unconstitutional. So John McCain better study up on his history a little bit. And secondly, McCain is reinventing himself on a daily basis, running away from his past as a Republican and trying to issue himself as a new Teddy Roosevelt populist. The Wall Street Journal is going bananas. They don't like it, and he is going to expose divisions within the Republican Party who are getting nervous he might go a little bit too far. But look, since the 1930s, and you brought up Hoover first, economic distress has played to the advantage of Democrats. The guys in charge are the Republicans. They championed deregulation in the free markets, and now it has all fell apart, and they've had to virtually nationalize the financial structure of this country. That is not a platform that is a winning platform for any Republican.
Look, we're in a very highly charged political season. This is a presidential election year. I do not think that John McCain needs to reinvent himself because he has always been a reformer for 25 years while he's been in the Congress. When people say that nobody was raising the warning signs here, that nobody was screaming about what was happening, there were two people, one of whom is Mort Zuckerman, sitting on this panel over a year ago talking about the contagion that was beginning from Fannie and Freddie and the corruption and the excesses happening in those quasi-governmental institutions. And one of the other high-profile guys screaming and raising the boom and raising the warnings was John McCain. He is eminently credible on this when he raises these issues. Barack Obama coming out and talking about cleaning house, the administration, and so on. Barack Obama was the second highest recipient of donations from Fannie and Freddie. The first, of course, was Chris Dodd, who's the head of the Senate Banking Committee. So to be legitimate on these issues, and I understand the politics of this, but Barack Obama ought to be very careful about where he's casting stones.
What?
Well, the single greatest contributor to the housing bubble was Fannie and Freddie. And everybody knew that Fannie and Freddie was two institutions, two government-sponsored enterprises that were out of control. They made over $600 billion of investment in subprime mortgages in the first 6 years of this century, and that contributed mightily to what we are all now having to deal with. And Paulson, when he said the core of the problem was the collapse of housing, that's where it all started, in the subprime field. And in fairness, Obama did nothing on that. However, Cox, the SEC commissioner, was the man who sat there while they doubled and even tripled the ability of financial houses to use leverage. They went from a maximum of 12 to 1 to as high as 40 to 1, and this was the core of what happened on the other side, which was the basic overuse of leverage overuse of leverage that compounded the problem in the housing world, and vice versa. That's what we're dealing with.
You want to talk about Cox's predecessor, Franklin Raines?
He was, Cox was the head. He was fined $35 million on Friday.
Huh?
He gave up a $35 million fine, as I understand it, on Friday. Franklin Raines did. His successor, who was it? Jim Jones was in there.
Jim Jones.
What's the point? What's the point?
The point is, this is a Democratic scandal at Freddie Mae or Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Come on,
Did Cox clean it? I'm not clear on you. Wait a minute now. Did Cox clean it up?
Cox is on the SEC. The SEC has no jurisdiction over Fannie and Freddie as a practical matter. The Congress did. The Congress refused to regulate them, even though people like McCain said you've got to regulate them. And not only McCain. I mean, this started in the Democratic administration. It was a Democratic honeypot. Let me just finish, if I may. Okay? This is was a huge, because it's $6 trillion. We're talking $6,000 billion. That was the single greatest contributor to the speculation in the housing world. The other side of it was the overuse of leverage by the financial firms.
Wait a minute now. Did McCain call for the resignation of Chris Cox of the Securities and Exchange Commission?
Yes, he did.
Why?
Because they changed the regulations, or relieved the regulations that would have contained the leverage or the excess borrowing or the excessive use of debt in all of Wall Street, particularly the top 5 firms. They gave them special treatment. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, who still survived, Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, and Bear Stearns, who no longer survived. 3 out of the 5 blew up, and that is a testament to what they allowed them to do.
Before we conclude that Barack Obama is responsible for the financial collapse,
we didn't conclude that. That's not what I said. Not even close.
votes.
You pretty much
no,
were
I
saying
did. Not
it.
even pretty much.
He
He was
got
one
more.
of many senators. Do not tell me what I said, please.
He was one of many senators in both parties.
He
they're
was the second largest recipient of contributions, and he didn't vote in favor of it, and McCain went the other way. At least give him credit for that.
And if he is so powerful, then he must be responsible for this whole thing.
I
And
didn't
poor
say he
John
was
McCain
powerful.
must be ineffectual if he couldn't stop it. Look, this is an equal opportunity scandal between both parties. They are intertwined with Wall Street, intertwined with Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Rick Davis, the campaign manager for John McCain. Excuse me, let me finish.
But why did you
let me finish. Lobbied against regulating these government entities. There is plenty of blame to go around. And we had a nice moment in this country the other night when the members of Congress of both parties stood with the Treasury Secretary and the Federal Reserve.
Why then?
Quickly.
Why then?
We're going to get out.
Okay. Why? It's a question for you, Eleanor. Why then did you trash the Republican philosophy for the entire thing, which you just did in your opening remarks?
Because
if it's bipartisan.
Yeah, because the philosophy goes back to 1980. And the members of Congress, Reagan, and deregulation, government is not part of the solution, it's the problem. That's been the philosophy. Now, all of a sudden, government is the solution.
Let me move on. If I had known that Fannie and Freddie would have produced this stir, we would have gotten to it a lot earlier. My God. Okay, a McCain gaffe?
Our economy, I think, still, the fundamentals of our economy are strong.
McCain says the fundamentals of our economy are strong. Is that a gaffe? Watch.
And this foundation of our economy, the American worker, is strong.
Question, is McCain solving the problem he created when he says that the American worker is the foundation, presumably the collective fundamentals of the economy? Does that give him cover, Monica?
Well, he tried to clean up his initial comment there, but what you didn't play, the second part of his clip was the fundamentals of the economy are strong, and then he said, but we are in very, very difficult times, which nobody played, including you. He tried to say he was talking about the American worker, but there are elements in this economy, which is vast and complex, that do remain strong. That is worker productivity. Unemployment, which is starting to tick up, still remains at historical lows. Exports remain very high. There is a more favorable trade balance going on, which is producing this growth that we saw in the last quarter of 3.3%. I'm not saying that politically it was a very smart thing for him to say. He tried to clean it up, and he wasn't entirely wrong when he made that comment.
We've got a huge trade deficit. What it's like saying is, look, the organs of the body, most all of them are in great shape. The heart has just seized up badly.
That's right. It was not exactly.
We were almost going under last Monday.
Is there a connection between the Wall Street havoc, this is a setup for you, Buchanan, again, between the Wall Street havoc and globalism?
Well, of course
Pat
there is.
Buchanan.
Of course there is. This went all over the world. There's a little bank in England went down early from the subprime thing.
Northern Rock.
This spreads. This is like a cancer that metastasizes immediately because of globalization and because we're no longer economic nationalists and independent the way we once were.
Are we
40
talking
years
about
ago.
the Singapore Exchange, the Tokyo Exchange, the Bond Exchange?
Everything.
Well, sure.
We're talking about the London Exchange?
John,
I want to hear from more. Wait a
China
minute, I want to hear
lost
from more.
70%.
We exported trillions of dollars of this subprime and mortgage paper around the world. Every major bank in the world holds this paper, and if it had gone under, it would have been a catastrophe around the world. It would have caused a run on the dollar.
Is that phenomenon going to create any kind of a momentum, a negative momentum, to keep our crisis here going?
Well, without question, if Europe and Asia, China has a couple of $1 trillion of our assets. If those assets turned out to be worth a lot less, it's going to have a big effect on us. Sovereign funds have been pouring money into this country in order to save the banking system. If that stops, it's going to hurt us. So we are an international financial world now. That's inescapable.
You didn't mention the $85 billion bridge loan to AIG because they insure banks and financial entities all around the world. And if banks stop lending to ordinary people and stop lending to each other, the whole financial system just seizes up.
You approve of the Fannie Freddie loan to the bailout
I think there was a desperation here that all of this had to be done. But I do not approve of the golden parachutes, and I think they've stepped in on that. And one of John McCain's
you know that Biden is opposed to the AIG bailout. It is equivalent to a de facto seizure, is it not?
Of AIG, yes, they got 80, and in fact, they got 80% of the company.
Of that.
Well, he may disapprove of it. If that's the case, he doesn't know what the transaction was and what the consequences would have been. It would have caused a worldwide freeze.
Put that in writing, and we'll see that he gets it. When we come back, let's hear from the Veeps.
If, for such a small word, it packs a wallop. If I live to 100, if Social Security isn't enough, if my heart gets broken, if she says yes. We believe if should never hold you back. If should be managed with coverage that builds on what you already have. Together, we can create a personal safety net, a launching pad for all those brilliant ifs in the middle of life. Call on our expertise and get guarantees for the if in life. After all, we're MetLife.
We've provided a platform for success for some of the most respected companies in the country. We fueled their growth with a highly educated workforce and a can-do, pro-business attitude. Just ask our newest business partner, Toyota. Visit Mississippi.org to see what we can do for you.
Issue 2, Jolton Joe and Sainted Sarah.
The American worker is strong. They've been betrayed. They've been betrayed not only by Wall Street, but by this administration's policies and the policies John has supported. This has been a Republican philosophy of letting Wall Street do what they want and the middle class be damned. It's about time we change it. If I sound like I'm angry, I am fighting mad for middle class people who have been the scapegoat of this economy because of the policies of the McCains and the Bushes.
Question: is Biden genuinely a populist, or is this political posturing? I ask you, Ilona.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think he does have middle-class DNA, and he is still the boy from Scranton and all of that, but he also represents a state that is heavily involved in the credit card industry, and he's probably signed on to some legislation that doesn't pass the populist label.
You mean Delaware is a fire-free zone for corporations?
And the point is that all of Washington, there is an intertwining here, and it's intertwined with campaign contributions and all of that. Nobody's hands are clean. John McCain's hands are not clean. Barack Obama hasn't been here long enough to get too sullied, but he's not totally pure either. Now, you have to ask, though, who do you trust more to change the economy away from George W. Bush? And the polls show it's 62 to 30 something.
You know that the National Journal put together a liberal listing 100 senators, and that Barack Obama is the #1 liberal of 100 senators. I'm not finished, just a moment.
Right.
I see you warming up over there. Number 3 is Joe Biden. So we have pretty much the perfect liberal ticket. Yeah. Is that a fair statement?
The number 2, I believe, is Bernie Sanders, and he's a socialist.
I thought we had it. It's perfectly timed, because you're now witnessing a debunking of the Republican philosophy of letting the markets run unfettered. So we need some good liberals in
As a matter of fact,
we got some socialism too, and the takeover of all these nationalization of AIG and Bear Stearns, all these other things.
That's
Socialism.
on the Republican side. That's right.
Okay. Republican vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin says that the oversight regime that regulates Wall Street needs to be modernized.
It's a 1930s type of regulatory regime overseeing some of these corporations, and we've got to get a more coordinated and a much more stringent oversight regime.
So what's the regime?
First and foremost, taxpayers cannot be looked to as the bailout, as the solution to the problems on Wall Street. Even more significant is the role that the lobbyists play in an issue like this also. And then that cronyism. It's symptomatic of the greater problem that we see right now in Washington, and that is just that acceptance of the status quo, the politics as usual, the cronyism that has been allowed to be accepted. We've got to put government and these regulatory agencies back on the side of the people.
Question, is Palin successfully stealing the cronyism Washington is broken platform from Barack and from Joe? I ask you.
She is the perfect messenger for this message. It's tailor-made for her. She's from Alaska. She's outside the Washington establishment. This is the main reason why John McCain chose her to begin with. Not because she's a woman, not because he was trying to attract the Hillary voters. It's for going after middle-class voters, white working-class voters. This message, because she hasn't been part of this mess that Obama and Biden and frankly John McCain has been too.
The more we talk about serious economic issues, the more irrelevant Sarah Palin seems. She cannot see Wall Street from her front porch. She has not thought about.
You mean as she can see Russia?
She is
okay, hold on.
Breathtakingly hypocritical about cronyism. Which
notwithstanding that, I want to point out to you, Pat. Hold on. The GOP is in bloom. New polling data says that all might not be lost for the GOP, the Republicans. The Pew Research poll of independent voters shows that both the Democratic and Republican parties are equally favored in the public mind. The poll says that independents give Republicans a 50% favorable rating, and the independents give the Democrats a 49% rating. Question, has Sarah Palin struck again? Has she transformed the Republican image and the polling? I ask you, Pat. Exit question.
Sarah Palin is the salvation of the GOP, and maybe of this country.
Eleanor, is she responsible for this?
The Palin phenomenon is fading. The Democrats will pick up at least 4 or 5 seats in the Senate and 15, 20 seats in the House.
Has Palin moved this enormous seesaw? This weight is now up?
She was chosen to go after the bulk of those independent voters who like their guns and their religion as much as she does. Yes.
Listen, she's a political phenomenon. She transformed the whole campaign for the presidency. You cannot dismiss that. Whatever you feel about her, she's been extraordinary. She changed it completely.
Alas, the sainted Palin. We'll be right back with predictions.
The McLaughlin Group is brought to you by Mississippi Development Authority. Visit Mississippi.org to see what we can do for you.
We've provided a platform for success for some of the most respected companies in the country. We fueled their growth with a highly educated workforce and a can-do, pro-business attitude. Just ask our newest business partner, Toyota. Visit Mississippi.org to see what we can do for you.
For people close to retirement, there are plenty of ifs to go around. If our savings will last, if we should take Social Security when we hit 62 or 67. MetLife can strengthen your retirement plan by providing a lifetime stream of income that's guaranteed and that works together with your investments, helping you create a safety net that brings Happy New Year's with guarantees for the if in life. MetLife can help make the most of what you have in retirement.
Predictions, Pat.
The decisive move by Bush, Bernanke, and Paulson will raise Bush up to around 35 to 40% in the polls.
Eleanor.
A lame duck session of Congress after the election.
How long?
2 weeks.
The pro-Western government of Ukraine collapsed this week. Moscow will see to it that it's replaced by a Russian puppet government.
If they don't approve the present equivalent of an RTC, we will have a major economic freeze and a credit breakdown in this country.
What's the RTC?
This is the idea that the federal government will buy these illiquid loans that pervade the entire financial system, most of them tied to real estate, more residential real estate.
I predict that history will tell us that the U.S. clandestinely okayed the invasion by Georgia of South Ossetia. Don't forget, you can see the McLaughlin Group anywhere in the world at McLaughlin.com. Bye-bye.